Hello and welcome to the third episode of the podcast series from South Asia Democratic Forum (SADF). Hosting today again, I am Rayhan Rashid, joining from England, and joining with us today from Brussels, Mr. Paulo Casaca. Uh, to tell you about Paulo, he is a former member of the European Parliament and of the national and regional parliaments of Azore. Paulo is the founder and executive director of South Asia Democratic Forum. Uh, Hello, welcome, Paulo.
Well, thank you very much for taking your time and your attention to SADF. It's really an opportunity for me as director of SADF to be in this conversation with you, Dr. Rayhan Rashid. I am based in Brussels, but I am not speaking from Brussels right now.
Oh, you're from somewhere else today.
I am in the south of Portugal, in my
Oh, okay.
the house of my grandparents, the former house of my grandparents that passed away a long time ago. But I think it is a very timely opportunity to start our conversation on the disaster unfolding on Bangladesh and why is it so, and what should we be concerned with, what issues should we delve in to understand what's going on, and to ultimately help the Bangladeshi people to overcome this very dark period of its history.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Kasaka, for joining with us. I can see that you're spending time with your family during the Christmas break. Uh, Even in this time, I appreciate that joining today's podcast to discuss Bangladesh. Uh, for someone who have been following the progress and development of Bangladesh for many years, we know that we have been following very closely. Uh, so, well, a lot of things happened in the last few months. So, from your perspective, uh, can you just take us through briefly how things were, in your opinion, and how things are at the moment, and where it is heading, and what makes you concerned?
Well, the most, there are, I would say, two issues that I consider very, very concerning. One of them is that we have a sensation of deja vu when we are seeing the present events with what happened already 53 years ago, 1971. This deja vu is made of these atrocities that are being perpetrated by both military forces, but mostly by fanatic Islamic forces, just as it happened 53 years ago. Secondly, by the consistent lying from the Western world, democratic world, if you want, with a big exclusion, which is very important, as it was already 53 years ago, which is India. Fundamentally, the United States, the United Kingdom, and to a certain extent the European Union are just closing their eyes, are just pretending that things are going very well, no problem is occurring. They are even blessing a so-called constitutional process where a completely unelected body is taking itself the task of making a new constitution, which is a blatant violation of all the basic principles of freedom and democracy that we have been growing with. And so this is very similar with what happened 53 years ago. But what is not similar, and it's even more worrying, is the degree, the sophistication of the lie that we are being told. Because, when you see one of the exponents of human rights, of tolerance. One of the most brilliant intellectuals I've ever met in my life, wherever I've been, who is Shariar Kabir, being charged with the crimes of genocide. Just imagine,
Yes.
someone that actually, I think he never used a gun in his life, and he used very much his skills as film producer, as a writer, mostly as a writer,
And the most
both.
bizarre thing is he had been vocal against genocide as a campaigner,
Absolutely.
as a
So
researcher.
it is
So
exactly,
that's the most bizarre part.
no, this is exactly like reading Orwell, but reading Orwell, making it exactly obeying the script. You remember that in Orwell, for instance, the Ministry of Truth was the minister in charge of fabricating lies. The Minister of Love was the ministry in charge of torturing people. This is the same thing. I mean, those that perpetrated the genocide and the lawyers of these perpetrators of the genocide are now in charge of the International Crimes Tribunal that was uh, raised exactly to uh, punish those culprits of this genocide. So it is exactly the reversal of everything that is the reality. And this is really a novelty because, to such an extent, we have never seen this before. I mean, Afghanistan, which was a bit what happened 3 years before what happened in Bangladesh, it was very similar procedures, we have to say. I mean, the takeover by the Taliban. I mean, the Taliban still they did not claim that they were doing it on the name of the human rights. I mean, they did not get this level of hypocrisy. And so what we are seeing now is really a complete new chapter. And this is very worrying, of course, for the Bangladesh people that are suffering the consequences of this, but for the global stage as a whole, because if it is possible to put these lies, these absolutely fabricated lies, as truth, I mean, anything is possible everywhere in the world. So we must all be very concerned with what is happening in Bangladesh.
Yeah, you mentioned about lies and lies at a global scale at the moment. Uh, uh, these lies, is the world watching? Like, is the world capable of understanding that this
Well, it
extent of
is.
lies?
I think some people did understand. I mean, even Mr. Trump did understand. Although he is, whenever you speak of him, normally there is a polarizing effect, like he would be all white or all black, which is nonsense. I mean, he's a human being. He has, I think he has a lot of charisma, which is obvious, and he has a lot of intuition as well, but he's not really an eagle in intellectual terms, it's obvious. But he grasps that there is a problem here. He grasped a long time ago, as a matter of fact, and so he is able to see. And this is perhaps my hope of seeing things put where they should belong. That what we are witnessing is a human rights catastrophe, to start with, to imprison the most vocal defenders of human rights, and to imprison them, accusing them of genocide, is the most horrendous situation we can imagine. It is also a disaster in economic terms. In spite of the propaganda made by The Economist, which is really a very dark
A country,
blot on this
yes,
periodic. I mean, all the international bodies, the credit rate agencies, and even the World Bank assessment are seeing a very bleak economic situation coming out of these events. And politically, it's even more concerning because we are seeing a dictatorial system to be accepted and to be said, oh, it's very good, that whoever takes power by force and makes a constitution, and oh yeah, and then this is democracy.
You make a very interesting point. Let me come back to the political aspect of it later. Uh, uh, can you elaborate a little bit more about the economic situation? You just mentioned some of the indexes and forecasts. For the viewer, if you can uh, take us through step by step, like what
Well,
is it exactly?
I think we, we, the public should be able to distinguish between, propaganda and institutions that sometimes they get wrong. There is no infallibility, but that are very much independent. And Moody's credit rate agency is a case in point, and they published
Yes.
a report on the outlook of the Bangladesh economy that is absolutely devastating, saying, not only registering the clear drop in all the macroeconomic indicators, but having the prospect that it will go further down for both economic and mostly for political reasons, for the lack of democratic rights and for the lack of law and order respect, that the outcome is very bleak. But I would also like to say, that looking backwards, this is a major failure, of course, because it's not possible to understand that this mob violence is so widespread and this lack of respect for human dignity is so widespread in Bangladesh 53 years after its independence. I think that those who are for a liberal and democratic system in Bangladesh, they must consider their responsibilities as well, because obviously they also failed. That's something that I felt very much in January when I was accompanying the elections in Bangladesh. What failed was not at all what was reported to have failed. I think that the mechanics of fair elections were there. I saw how it worked. I do not believe at all in any sort of plot, organized plot to derail the elections. I think this is propaganda. But obviously the main competitor was not there. The BNP was not there, and this was devastating, as the reality proved. Of course, that when I raised the issue with members of the government, they would say, "Well, that's their will, and some of their leader is a convicted terrorist," which is true. It is absolutely undoubtable that he is responsible for a terrorist attack that killed many people and injured seriously even Sheikh Hasina. And so, of course, the responsibility is not only from one side, but the responsibility is for the society as a whole and for all of the political establishment. That's a reality. Bangladesh did not manage to put in place a democratic system where there was clearly always a choice between powers, People, after 15 years, I felt this. They wanted a change. It's undoubtable. I felt it. And as it did not come democratically, there was not a credible opposition. It came through violence. That's the problem. The difference between, a democratic system and a totalitarian or authoritarian system as a whole, not totalitarian, more authoritarian, is exactly this one, that how do you change power? Peacefully, democratically, or through violence? That's the problem. Okay, so this is a failure. For instance, India, I think India has been put in the limelight, as the big problem. Oh, India is, it's because of India. Well, of course, this is a
That's the
misrepresentation.
standard narrative.
That's a standard narrative, exactly. Of course, the real reason why India is the problem is that India is a democratic experience. And is democratic not only in the votes, because it is democratic in terms of votes, but in another characteristic which is the separation of powers. Mr. Modi does not have a say on what the Supreme Court decides. This is essential. And unfortunately, this was not the case in Bangladesh. This is part of the problem. And so these two things are fundamental. Of course, in India, India is the biggest country in the world, and you have loads of problems. Some of them very similar to those that you see in Bangladesh, like this fanatic violence. Some of it now it's in the northeast of the country, in India, so not very far from Bangladesh, and of course also influenced by what the problems that we are seeing in Myanmar, Burma, and now in Bangladesh. So India, of course, is not ideal, but saying that Sheikh Hasina was an agent of India is completely nonsense. It's a lie. It's not true. Actually, India had a lot of misgivings on the way that Sheikh Hasina opened up or allowed the military to have such close relations with China, for obvious reasons. There was a big concern in India on the Chinese openness from Bangladesh in economic terms as well. A lot of the projects that were done within the so-called Silk Road with military interests and China, that worried a lot India. And of course, India was not pleased either.
That's an interesting aspect you raised. Uh, so I'd like to know, like, how did we reach here? The geopolitics, the regional politics, the deep state. What is your take on that?
Well, I think there are several factors. I think that we should not see only one. There was an external plot. Yes, there was. I have no doubt about it. I saw it. The Qatar Gate. You have to read the reports that were given to the Human Rights Subcommittee of the European Parliament, the committee that the press rightly called the Qatar Gate Subcommittee. And it was completely influenced by Qatar through the United States, because these NGOs were financed through the United States, but it's Qatar that is in the other hand, in the end of the circuit. And they were very active in Afghanistan, in laying the ground for the takeover of the Taliban, and also for preparing the ground for Bangladesh, erasing everything, all the notions of the 71 genocide, and pretending that the only human rights problem in Bangladesh were the problems of the government of Sheikh Hasina. There were problems, of course. I'm not saying that there were no problems. There were, but they were not the same sort of problems that happened in in the genocide. So, of course, there was a plot. Of course, I saw it very well. Whoever was working in the international arena understood it. What is not obvious is the source of the plot, and I think there I saw a bit further than most observers, because I saw the fingerprints of Qatar where other people did not see it, because they did not analyze sufficiently the Qatar Gate. If they would do it, they would understand it better. I'm sure of it. But there are also internal problems. I mean, the internal issues is that, the military were not reformed. I mean, the military that made the coup of 75, of course, the people that did it were ultimately sentenced to, and the justice was fulfilled. But I mean, the body, the philosophy, and the logic was not reformed, and it came actually in 75. It was the Pakistani army sort of ideology that is still there. It didn't change, and that's a big failure. Second one is the fanatic Islamism. I mean, I saw it developing during Sheikh Hasina government. I mean, it's very simple. You just go to among the popular quarters around Dhaka, and you see how women used to wear, the first time I was there in 2012, and how they were wearing now in 2024. It's completely different. In 2024, you had the impression of being in Afghanistan. That's the reality, And so this is obviously I don't. I'm not. I cannot speak. On a very detailed analysis, but I think this analysis, if it will be done, will show what this sign reflects. I'm sure of it. And thirdly, most importantly, democracy is about the capacity to change governments. If there is no credible alternative after 15 years, people don't like it. I mean, of course, there was corruption. I mean, there is corruption everywhere. There was more corruption in Bangladesh than elsewhere. I don't know. Something to be seen. I'm not convinced. Of course, there
No,
is corruption
I
in
agree
India.
with you. Like democracy is needed, if not for anything else, at least for the sake of peaceful transition of power.
Exactly. That's a very important characteristic. And for whatever reason, okay, it's because of the NP, it's because of Jamaat, it's because of Awami League. Never mind. Wait, never mind. Of course, it does mind. But the most important thing is that this alternative was not possible. And that's a problem. That was a problem. So all of this was important to give this result. So regarding the future, the first declaration I did after the unfolding of the disaster is that it is for the Bangladeshi civil society to think and to draw, the strategies. But personally, after seeing that most of the Bangladesh societies are either exiled, those who are most important, those who are able to challenge reality, are either exiled or in prison, or some of them even dead. I
But
cannot
what would
prevent
be
my.
the cost of not doing that? Like the way things are heading, uh, I know it would be asking you to speculate, but I just need to ask you: do you think the way things are heading, a peaceful transition is possible?
Well, right now I don't think so. But we have to consider how to get there. We have to consider this. Of course, that if there will be any sort of elections where those who are standing for democratic rights, like the Awami League as well, but all the other liberal intellectuals, if they are prevented to present themselves as the present authorities have announced, of course, there will not be any fair elections. Anyway, I think that the whole of this construct, where a constitution is being done on the shadows by unelected bodies and by people that have no competence on constitutional affairs, by the way, as we already saw in previous podcasts. Nothing of this is credible. But I think, the most important issue is to have a strategy, I think the number one, India. India is very important because India is actually the democratic model that should be followed in Bangladesh. I have no doubts about that. That's where we should look at to inspire ourselves in terms of democratic system. That is, how to do that people will fundamentally trust in elections for taking decisions on government and to have independent bodies within the governing structure. That's the most important things. India, contrarily to all of the propaganda that has been done, is fundamentally concerned with Bangladesh not being a Chinese basis for any attack on India, and of course, which is more or less the same thing, terrorist groups from Bangladesh making mayhem elsewhere in India, and now mostly in the northeast, which is a very sensitive and very unstable area. That's what India is concerned with. India, Mr. Modi will not impose any economic interests. It will. It's not true. It's not the way that India acts. There's nothing to fear from this point of view. So India is obviously the most important platform to do whatever in Bangladesh. Well, secondly, I think that from the previous government, the Awami League, there must be a reflection on what did not go well. And there must be a way to separate those that, for several reasons, were against the government in July 2024, but still they want a democratic process, and so there must be an understanding with these people and those people that in Awami League they believe in democracy, they believe in alternative forms of government, they believe in a liberal society. This is crucial. Of course, it's not Mr. Yunus. Mr. Yunus, he never, he always wanted power, but he never wanted to be challenged by the vote. He never did it. He has a very big political career. He has, contrarily to what the public opinion tries to tell us, he is in the political sphere for a very, very long time, in the interim governments and with possible parties and so on and so on. He has been in politics for a very long time, but he doesn't like democracy. It's obvious. Now it's, what we are seeing now, it's in very much in phase with what he has done in the past. But there are certainly forces within the BNP, and perhaps not only, that will be allies in this process. Well, the United States and the international community, Mr. Trump, is not a guarantee that things will be different in the West. We have to be very, very cautious there, because, Mr. Trump, for instance, regarding Afghanistan, he made the first false steps regarding Afghanistan. It was not the Biden administration was even worse than he was, for sure. Doesn't mean that he was good. No, in relative terms, Biden was worse. But he was not doing the right thing. And, you know, the force of the Qatar money is immense. You know, there was a first page article in Financial Times a couple of weeks ago that I actually bought it, you know, and I have it because it's really fascinating from the main manager of the Qatar National Fund saying, well, we have so much money, you know, of the gas price that increased and the gas explorations that we did lately. We have $50 billion. We have to see what to do with it, and we think it's most of it is going to the United States and the United Kingdom. Okay, very good. It's very, very telling. Of course, this money will not come without a price. And the price, as Qatar has shown in the past, is to have this Islamist agenda on the top of its actions. And Bangladesh is a main target, was already a main target after Afghanistan. Of course, now they want to destroy India. They want to go for Kashmir, for instance. That's obvious. They want to reverse what has been done in Kashmir, and they want it to be again a big mess, a big playing field for jihadi. And of course, if they can do the same thing in the northeast of India, they will be very pleased. That's what they are looking at. And so Mr. Trump will look at 50 billion, you know, because Mr. Trump is also, you know, very pragmatic and is businessman in a very crude way. And so, you know, the Qatar is paying for the presence of the Fifth Fleet in Qatar, and the Pentagon, you know, is saying, "Oh, that's fantastic! They are our allies because they are paying for it," which is a very difficult reasoning to accept. But that's exactly the reasoning of Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump wants to have this sort of transactional deals all over the world. I mean, you pay. You want us to defend South Korea? You pay. Europe, you want us to defend? You pay. I mean, otherwise we don't do it. And this is also not very good, you know, because things cannot be decided by money only. I mean, money is a very important thing, and it will always be. But if it is the only obsessional thing commanding everything that we do, we are in big trouble. And that's what I fear, you know. So, but anyway, Mr. Trump is certainly better than the Biden administration, and we have to engage with it, and we have to try to him to understand that the way forward is democracy in Bangladesh, to allow a peaceful decision by Bangladeshi people of what to do, respecting the rights of everyone, without any lynching, without any violence, but just respecting what the people want, and respecting all minorities, and having a credible strategy for economic development. And I think that the American administration, the new American administration, might be fundamental for this purpose. Of course, in understanding with the Indian authorities.
But in order for that to work, do you think it is how essential it is for to be in Bangladesh? Like you know, how essential it is for there to be good faith actors? Do you think the actors who are running the country, some of them, they good faith actors?
Well, I think that in Bangladesh, the real power behind the Yunus and the students' folkloric, you know, administration, it's the Islamists. It's the only credible and powerful and internationally network that it really counts. It's the fanatic Islamists, and so well, the rest I think it will fade away, with time. These ideas. I have been reading some of the interviews given by the so-called student leaders. I mean, it's completely. I mean, it's a mix of ignorance and fantasy. It's a waste of time to reading them. I mean, they don't know what they are speaking about. And if we want to be, generous with them, we just say, well, it's a matter of ignorance. You instead of studying, they have been, just parading violence. So they just don't know what they are saying. So they have to learn a bit before before anything else. It's not that they are necessarily evil-minded. It's they don't know what they are saying. Fundamentally, I don't think that we should pay them much attention, and Mr. Yunus either. Because among various other things, because he's not a young man any longer. So they are not really what matters. What matters is the fanatics. Because it's a very organic, a very well developed network, and this is the big problem.
It has been a fascinating discussion, Mr. Casaca. We are nearing the end of our podcast. I think we have to wrap up. Uh, uh, So, dear audience, I would request you to please follow the SADF channel and follow the podcast. We will come up with more interesting discussions like this every week. So, stay with us. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Paulo Casaca, for joining today with us.
Thank you very much. Looking